Hi, Stephanie. We're looking forward to having you speak at the PMI Central Mass Chapter Professional Development Day series we're having in September. We want to give people a feel for kind of what those sessions are going to be like. So just asking you just a few questions to kind of tease us to what the content would be. So people have asked, they've already been managing a global team, and what do they need to do better or differently?
So the biggest thing that we can talk about is how to formalize the informal or make the implicit explicit. And that's because the more distance you have and the more team-based work you need and the more locations you have, the higher need for formalized processes and procedures. So it's beyond just kind of team norms about how we're going to communicate or how people are going to how they're going to who needs to know what where and how you're going to manage issues and some of the classic project stuff. You need to go beyond that to have things like what technology are we going to use for what? So we need a plan for what gets communicated via which tool, but when are we going to use email? When are we going to post? When are we going to use chat? How are we going to do that? How are we going to find each other? And so those become really important around formalizing those informal structures. And that does a couple of things. One is it creates an understanding of how people can share, right? The ways in which they can share formally and informally. We know that that innovation often suffers in a virtual and global environments. And so you have to, and innovation often comes from those informal ad hoc kinds of things. And so you have to put into place ways in which people can find each other. And in particular, I think, given that we don't have the opportunity to potentially go in person anymore as we might have before, we need to understand something called proximity bias. And that is a bias really towards people who are located closer with us, either with us in the same office or closer geography-wise. And the more time zones you span, the greater at risk you are, particularly as the project manager or leader, to be sort of fall into a bias of those who are located with you or closest to you. And so having those formalized informal aspects of the way in which you're managing the team can really help to overcome some of those. And so it's understanding which tools to use, how to use them, small things like having a check-in at the beginning of your meeting. And when I do this especially with engineering organizations, and I ask them to sort of, share their favorite color, vacation, I can feel the eye rolls around the world. They're going, oh, this is such a waste of time. But it really, maybe it takes 5 minutes, maybe it takes 2 minutes for people just to check in. At Bridging Distance, we do this with our own team, and one of the favorite ones is to share, like, your favorite coffee mug in the morning, or if it's a beer glass and you're later in the day, just something about you and why, and it doesn't take long. So that's another aspect in terms of formalizing that, getting to know each other.
Great, thanks. I'm looking forward to getting into more detail on this.
Yep, should be fun.